as we look at this whole story, I did add that in because there's so much about the story about this man born blind. I can't cover it all. But what struck me this year, it's a living word, right? Do you read the same story over and over your whole life and then something just happens that never happened before? So I realized that this man born blind did not know who told him. He has no idea of who this guy is. But he does as he says. Now, if my parents were here, they are with Jesus now, but they would tell you I had a hard time following directions. Actually, the bishop and his staff might say, I don't know, can't speak for them, but they might even say I have trouble following directions. So that's what impressed me most about John's gospel. The ultimate concern of this gospel story, as told by John, is that we are invited into this intimacy and love that we can rest in the heart of God. For God so loved the world that he gave his only Son, that all who believe in him will not perish but will live eternally. This gospel is about living in relationship, intimate, loving relationship with God. That was Jesus' purpose. His work was to come into the world to say, this is what matters above all else. And in this story today, even the law. So what I want to do too is kind of set up what's been happening. So that's the overall umbrella. I had to write this stuff down because it's... So in chapter 7, Jesus stays in Galilee. He's been right with the Samaritan woman at the well. And I just want to add in here. So this is what they say in chapter 7. The Jews were looking for an opportunity to kill him. So he's been up in Galilee, outside of Judea, because the Jewish religious leaders were trying to find an opportunity to kill him. So then what happens next? It's the Festival of Booths, the Feast of Tabernacles. So he goes back to Judea, and then comes this long discourse of his time at the temple during the festival. Festival of Booths, or Feast of Tabernacles, was they would build booths, and they'd live in them for 7 days. It was kind of a fall harvest celebration. And they recognized time to remember their time in the wilderness, their ancestors' time in the wilderness after the Exodus. So on the last day of this feast, where he's been hanging out for 7 days, he starts to get into some conversations. He talks about living waters. And the crowd is saying, could this guy be Messiah? Well, he is he's speaking like no one else has ever spoken. So then what happens? The temple police go back and tell the chief priests and the Pharisees. So when we read John's gospel and it says the Jews, we're not looking at the crowd, we are looking at the chief priests and some Pharisees, okay? Because the Pharisees end up being divided in today's story too. So they go to so the temple police take off, and Jesus retreats to the Mount of Olives. He comes back to the temple. Then he dares to say, I am the light of the world. So these I am statements, has Pastor Tim talked about that with y'all? Okay, so throughout John's gospel, we see and hear Jesus using these I am statements. Now, when Moses was at the burning bush and he said, "Who shall I say is sending me to Pharaoh?" The burning bush said, "I am Yahweh." And it can be translated, I was who I was, I am who I am, I will be who I will be. There is no tense to it. It's just eternal. You see, it's not governed by, this name is not, this one who says I am is not governed by time. Got it? So now here's Jesus talking to the crowds, and the chief priests and Pharisees are not happy, but he has all these I am statements. So let's see. Somebody shout out. I know you all know these. So I am the light of the world is one. What's another one? I am the bread of life. Oh, come on, y'all. I am the good shepherd. No, that's good. That you heard the gospel. I'm so glad you heard the story. Maybe you heard it also somewhere else. Yeah, he goes, yeah. What are some other ones, y'all? He goes to Lazarus' tomb, and what does he say to Mary and Martha? I am the resurrection and the life. He also says in the 14th chapter of John to his disciples, he says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. So there are all of these I am statements throughout this gospel. It's specific only to John's gospel. So now he's using an I am statement, which is the same as saying, the Father and I are one. He's been saying that throughout the story, and he's going to keep saying it more and more. It's going to build, it's going to crescendo, as it were. So the longer he's in the temple, the more this conflict keeps building. The more conflict that keeps building, the more the Jewish religious leaders are ready to put this guy down. He is creating trouble for them. For the man born blind, he gave new life. For the man born blind, he once lived in darkness and now lives in light. And what's remarkable about the irony of this is not only does he live in the light of the day, but he lives in the light of God's love through Jesus. We are called into relationship, an intimate relationship with God, y'all, in this gospel. And I read on into the Good Shepherd because I was struck by the fact that the man born blind actually did what this voice told him to do. He didn't see him. He said, now go and wash. He let him put clay in his eyes, made with a little spit. If somebody came after me like that, I'd be like, don't touch me. Days were different back then. So he followed Jesus' voice and did as he said, and healing came. So Pharisees and chief priests are after Jesus, and he says, listen, I'm the good shepherd. My flock hear my voice, and they follow me. And he's trying to invite them into this relationship. He says, you're not getting it. You're blind because you're not hearing God's voice speak to you. You're adhering so much to the law. There's no way to escape that in this particular story. God's love trumps everything. Anybody play pinochle? Yeah, a couple of us, right? The ace is the trump card. You always win that hand. Jesus' resurrection, death, resurrection, and ascension is what calls us into living a life of love, being aware and conscious, investing ourselves in this consciousness with God through Jesus, so that our shepherd's voice can direct us. Sometimes I want to go another way because I don't listen to directions very well, but then the shepherd comes and gets me and carries me home every time. That's what I give thanks to God for. And I ask you this question in closing. What voice, how is God's voice, Jesus' voice, speaking to the people of Bethlehem Lutheran Church? Where is God calling you to go? Where is God empowering you to tell the good news, to proclaim the good news of God's love? For all of this love and all of these great stories and for all of you, I give thanks. Amen.